Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme.
Congress wants to know what caused the Enron meltdown.
Now, while the collective rage currently is focused on WorldCom,
Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski was convicted of looting hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Find out more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
When you think of an oil baron, your mind probably wanders to oil-rich countries in the Middle East, the hilarious Adam Driver skit from SNL, or the Texas tea pumping machines spread throughout one of the country's largest states. What you probably don't think about are salads. Well, the oil baron we talk about today, Tino De Angelis, was focused on a different kind of oil. The kind that is edible. Your classic canola, your ambiguous vegetable, or even something more exotic like soybean or cottonseed oil. This oil would dress a salad, and thus the name salad oil is used. And Tino De Angelis ruled the world's supply of it for the opening years of the 1960s. Or at least he did on paper. Because after the market that he built turned sour by his own hand, the margin calls came flooding in, and the oil tanks were opened up, and what they found was a surprise to everyone. So let's dig into the great salad oil swindle on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
What's your favorite type of salad dressing?
Blue cheese.
Ooh, good one.
I've become an adult now. I used to not like blue cheese, and then I think I killed my taste buds with coffee and whiskey, and now I'm into it.
Yeah, blue cheese is good.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of White Collars, Red Hands. I'm Kashan.
And I'm Nina.
And today, we're talking about the great salad oil swindle. So, just quickly, acknowledging the main source for this week's episode, which is the book, The Great Salad Oil Swindle, published in 1966 and written by Norman Miller, whose firsthand reporting of the swindle earned him the Pulitzer Prize in 1964. And he later wrote this book, which I will say is, it was okay. It wasn't very interesting. So maybe we could do
salad oil wasn't interesting.
Maybe honestly, it got interesting, but like halfway through, like Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire don't come for me, people who like Harry Potter. But you know,
I do like the Goblet of Fire, but it was a slow burn.
It's one of my. It was my favorite book in the series. But yeah, it took a good 300 pages before I was like, okay, I get it. Anthony Tino De Angelis was born in the Bronx borough of New York City in 1915, with no surprise to Italian immigrant parents that had stepped off the boat about 15 years prior. Tino's dad was a hardworking railroad man, and Tino, seeing how hard his dad worked, was obsessed with the easy life and success. And also, for some reason, bicycling. Little Tino, who would remain a stunted 5'5" man in his adulthood, but not so stunted in the girth department as he was 250 pounds. He loved to race his bicycle, you know, and would say it gave him strong hands and calves that he kept even into his portliness. They really like to talk about how fat this guy was.
Well, he is the salad oil king. He ate a lot of oil.
I mean, salad implies that he would be.
There's a lot of unhealthy salads.
I mean, true. You start putting bread in there, and you're like, come on, man.
Croutons, cheese.
This is a deconstructed sandwich, actually, is what this is.
A lot of times that is what they are.
That's what I'm saying. He was ambitious, Tino, and he wanted good things before he paid his dues. He first proved this when he quit high school. He borrowed $500, which is about $11,000 in today's money, from his dad, and invested it in a candy store. I mean, he is kind of fat, right? The first thing he did was like, I'm going to throw all my money into candy. And he hoped that he could grow this into a lucrative business. Unfortunately, this just happened to be during the Great Depression. So believe it or not, most people were focused on buying things other than the luxury of candy. So he lost all of his investment and was forced to find another avenue of work pretty early.
That was also dumb of his dad to give him all that money.
His dad's a railroad worker. And you'll find out that Tino De Angelis has a pretty good way of talking people out of things that they don't want to give up, especially money. So, I mean, I'm not gonna fault his dad, although he raised a shit son. So maybe we should.
Jesus.
I don't know. He's on the episode today. What do you think?
Yeah, I know.
You think he's gonna save a bunch of orphans from a fire later? That's where this is going, huh?
He might put it out with salad oil. Don't you know if you pour oil on fire, it goes out immediately? Same with cooking grease.
If you guys light your house on fire, you cannot sue us. You cannot do that. All right?
I'm joking. That's a joke.
But you could try it.
Don't.
But you could.
You could, but don't do it.
You could, though. Anyway, Tino instead landed in the world of meat and fish markets. You know, easy segue from candy. And quickly rose to manager in just 3 years at the ripe age of 20. And his skill with a carving knife was supposedly something to behold. He made innovations to the process that cut down the time, pun intended, cut down the time to process a hog, thereby bringing the company more money. In 1938, he figured he would make this money for himself, and he opened up his own meat company by the name of M&D Hog Cutters. So he did, like, one of his big innovations was that they used to ship the hogs across the country to the east to get them slaughtered from where they were like farmed in the Midwest.
Okay.
And I guess it took this genius of a man to be like, why don't we just kill them here? And then send them the slabs to finish processing in the east for export. They would lose weight in the shipping process.
Oh, absolutely.
So
because
you would lose a lot of money.
Well, you would save a lot of money because also you don't need to feed the pigs.
Yeah.
So not only are you having a less heavy boat, but then you don't have to worry about all that food.
So he started M&D Hog Cutters with a $2,000 bank loan that he got, personal loan. This one actually worked out for him, unlike the one he got from his dad, as he created $300,000 a year in profit by the third year of the business.
Wow.
So he was doing pretty well in the world of meatpacking. After World War II ended, Tino opened another business, the De Angelis Packing Company, in New Jersey, where he would do most of his business from there on out. And he grew his workforce at this plant to 300 people and began looking to expand his meat business to other countries and began to look for export buyers. He quickly found a buyer in Yugoslavia who was seeking a large shipment of animal fat, beef fat, also known as tallow, for $1 million. But this is where we first find out that although De Angelis was a savvy businessman, he was still overly ambitious, just like he was when he was a kid. As upon receipt of the tallow, the Yugoslavians were upset, claiming that it was substandard, a complaint that cost De Angelis a $100,000 settlement.
Oh, man. They're like, this fat's not fat enough.
Yeah, I didn't really... It didn't go into discussion of why it was substandard. Maybe it was just gross. I know.
Well, it is pig fat.
Well, it's beef fat.
Oh, it's beef fat.
I'm pretty sure tallow is beef fat. I might be wrong.
It is.
I might be wrong on
it
that,
is.
Yeah.
It is beef fat. Unfortunately, my internet searches have been bringing up tallow a lot. I watched a woman eat tallow with a spoon the other day.
That's disgusting.
It was foul.
I do know that it has to be like rendered a couple times, right, for it to get the right consistency.
Yeah.
Like it can have impurities. So maybe that's what it was. Probably they just didn't render it enough times because, I mean, hey, here's the thing. Tino loved to cut corners. Just anything to make more money quickly. So his opportunities kept coming, however, even after that settlement, as in 1949, he bought a large stack of the Adolf Goebel Company. This was after World War II, remember? So, hey.
Well, that guy went out of business because his name was Adolf.
It's like, hey, change your name. Well, they weren't going out of business. They were still like a very fine company when he bought into them. And this was another meatpacking firm in New Jersey. and he was actually appointed its president. He was either appointed or he put himself in as the president because he kind of had a controlling stake after this. Now, looking for contracts, Goebel found a buyer in the U.S. Agriculture Department, which was looking for just shy of 19 million pounds of smoked meat for the federal school lunch program. And they gave the contract to De Angelis. But after Goebel delivered the meat to the U.S. government, they said that they had overstated the delivered quantity on the bill. So they had actually overpaid the Goebel company about $31,000 for meat that it hadn't delivered. And on top of that, 2 million pounds of it was not inspected by the USDA, which made it both ineligible and illegal to sell, as well as potentially dangerous for the school children it was meant to be for.
Wow, they actually cared about what they fed the kids back then.
Hey, now it's just pizza. You try to deliver not inspected pizza,
You done.
you're getting it. They're like, this isn't cut in rectangles. That's the only way school pizza can be.
It's the only way for some reason it can be.
How dare this be in triangles like pizza everywhere else? So DeAngelis forked over another $100,000 to settle that claim with the government,
dude.
as well. With more bad luck coming for Tino in 1953, as Goebel was caught understating its losses by the SEC by over $100,000. This, plus the previous business deals gone bad, led to the Goebel company filing for bankruptcy that year.
Damn.
And DeAngelis was unceremoniously booted from the presidency, although he would be reinstated later in 1958 after they recovered from their bankruptcy.
Interesting.
So just remember...
He's like, I'm just taking a leave of absence.
Yeah, they were basically like...
I'll be back.
They were like, you fucked up this company. Get out of here. And now he's going to go do some other stuff, and then they're going to be like, okay, you can come back. Okay, we forgive you.
Oh, all right. Well, just like...
We forgive you.
You've changed, right?
It's okay.
You've done a lot of work on yourself, and you've changed. Okay.
They're more like... you don't look as bad publicly anymore, so we'll take you back. Because he still owned part of it too, I think. So, undaunted by being beaten up by every government he dealt with, Tino set his sights on participating in a new U.S. program by the name of the Food for Peace program that was set up as a means to provide hungry people in underdeveloped countries with food products from the U.S., largely to countries left destitute following the war. Although it wouldn't be done by the U.S. government, of course, if it was just for other people's benefit. So it was also a way for the government to offload a bunch of U.S.-grown crops that they were buying as an indirect farming subsidy, because they were basically subsidizing crops to make it so that America was still competitive with other countries in their exports. But they made it so that we actually had too much food because of the subsidies. So they were like, we'll just give it away.
Interesting.
Seeing the opportunity in vegetable oils as the domestic supply was far outpacing the demand, which means it was a really good target for export, Tino took a pivot from his years of meatpacking experience and started the Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Refining Corporation, which lovingly rolls off the tongue, in 1955, and set up show in a rundown oil tank farm in Bayonne, New Jersey.
Now, do you I know that, like, you know how this story ends. I know that you researched this. And obviously, it's not going to end well because we're here today. But do you think that this was a smart business move for him, or should he have just stayed with meatpacking?
No, we're gonna learn that the company made money, and it was definitely always had the potential to be a profitable business. Tino ruined it.
Okay.
by always just wanting more than was afforded him. Like he just wanted to be the biggest at everything, even when he couldn't just take a good thing for what it is. He always wanted more. He's greedy.
Yeah.
The definition of it. So yeah. So this new oil tank farm in Bayonne. It had 150 storage tanks on premise, which were previously used to store petroleum products like gasoline. But they had all of the inside sandblasted.
I was going to say, I hope they cleaned it out.
And cleaned up, so they were converted to store salad oils. He was also credited with another big innovation, I guess, just like he was with killing the hogs before shipping them. And that was using tankers to transport oil. So before, if they sent salad oil across the seas on boats, they would put them in 50-gallon oil drums. And one day he was like, well, what if we sandblasted all these tanks? Let's just sandblast the inside of an oil tanker and fill it up with the oil, and you can just take it straight out of there. And
That's pretty smart.
And they actually saved a bunch of money because the barrels were fucking expensive.
Yeah, I'm sure they were.
So he had some good things.
Yeah, he wasn't totally dumb.
You know,
just a little dumb.
Yeah, he was foolhardy. I guess we'll say that. But he had refined, or he had updated all these tanks to be able to store oil. But he needed more money to build a refinery for the crude oil. So he talked to the export companies that were funded by the government to actually ship the oils out as part of the Food for Peace program, which it's very convoluted and complicated. But as far as I get it, he dealt with the export companies that would buy the oil from him, and then they would ship it to the country and get money from the government, and the government would get money from the country it was supposed to deliver to. Because they would give it away, but it was a reduced price. I think the country still paid. So he would deal a lot with export companies, which I did not. There were multiple that he dealt with. I didn't get into them. So thank me for that, because it was a very large part of the book. And so these export companies did provide him some backing. They were mostly on the East Coast, but they had to buy oils from the Midwest, and then they would have to pay for the cost of transporting it to them first before they could export it across the seas. Kind of the same thing with the hogs. They had to get it to the East Coast so they could actually get it to Europe, mostly, and places in the Soviet Union at the time. So instead, Tino could buy the crude oil, which was cheaper, do the more costly processing and refining process in New Jersey at the Bayonne plant, store the oil there, and then sell it just at a moderate markup to those companies than what they would have paid for it from the Midwest, because he was doing all this extra work closer to them. So they would no longer need to pay for the transport. They liked it, and they loaned him millions of dollars to start the process. And this turned out to be, as we mentioned, a success. And by the late 1950s, Allied was supplying a solid majority of the edible oil that was sold overseas, like 70%, greater than 70% of all the oil shipped overseas was provided by Allied. Everyone was making money, so companies gradually kind of forgot about the bad deals that De Angelis had been a part of, swindling the multiple governments and providing a subpar product.
We love a comeback.
So, although he was still getting into those bad deals, don't think he turned over a new leaf. Because now, back as president of the Goebel Company, they were accused by the SEC of overstating their lard inventories to falsely inflate their assets, and the commission had a witness ready to testify. They say they have all this lard. I seen their lard socks. They ain't got no lard. I'm assuming that's what he sounded like. Oh, lard.
Oh, Lord. Lord have mercy.
However, miraculously, as the trial loomed, this witness recanted their testimony out of nowhere, saying that they were wrong and that the lard was actually there. So this time, Tino escaped. He basically said...
That is fishy.
He came back and he's like, oh, yeah, I talked to them. They had the lard.
Oh, sorry. I just didn't see it.
It was in the other lard warehouse.
It was just... I missed it. Oops.
It's not because... my boss has vague ties to the mafia.
Has nothing to do with that, actually.
That's not it. Or because he bribed me.
I was like, this is like a lard Boeing situation. But they didn't die.
Which, by the way, I didn't talk about it in here, but there were a bunch of rumors that he was... he was also an Italian-American, so there's probably going to be rumors that he was connected to the mafia at this time. I don't know if any of that was true. I I personally don't think so. He didn't seem kind of like that guy. But there were rumors.
Did he just seem a little too dumb?
Yeah, I don't know. He just didn't seem like that, like, violent. You know, like he was an ambitious business person, but he wasn't like but he didn't feel like a cutthroat business person.
Yeah.
Like, he would honestly, most of the time, he would play the victim. Like, everyone just wants to come get me, you know? And that just doesn't feel like how a mafia man would run a business.
No, that's not what I would think.
So, I don't know. Maybe. He also personally was accused of tax evasion by the IRS.
That I believe he did.
It was said he dodged $1.5 million worth of taxes between 1944 and 1954.
And that's in that time's money.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So this is a lot of money. But Tino settled out of court and agreed to pay back only $250,000.
That's a steal.
No, that's a great deal.
This is Reaganomics at work.
Supposedly, he celebrated by throwing a big, like, renting out a hotel, like, banquet hall and throwing a party. And I was like, that's just... If that doesn't scream wealthy, then I don't know what does.
If that doesn't scream like that's fishy.
I only have to pay back a sixth of my tax evasion court charge. Yay!
Let me spend the rest of it in this party.
Yay! Let's get fucked up. But those in the salad oil industry didn't care. This rotund man was their cash cow, even though they were already showing signs of money mismanagement. Allied had a bank close their accounts after frequent overdrafts and bounced checks. However, money was still rolling into these accounts. A representative from the bank actually said, he's like, we didn't like want to close the account. Like, they were profitable, but it was just like they were doing some weird stuff, so we had to. Because Allied was making money. But soon, De Angelis would find out how to ruin it with his speculation in the commodities market. I should have mentioned earlier, he lost it also because he felt kind of like a gambling addict. And we're going to get into it. Because edible oils are a commodity, their prices are set by something called the futures market. And we've talked about futures previously on here multiple times, actually. So I'm just very briefly, it is a way that investors buy and sell physical goods like gold and crops, most of the time without ever actually receiving the physical good. They buy an option to buy or sell a certain amount of the commodity at a predetermined time at a predetermined price. So based on how you buy them, you can either short sell it or play long in a way that if the price goes up or down and you bet the correct way, you get a return. And these speculations then influence the price of the actual commodity to an extent. Because you are technically buying and selling the actual thing. Like the actual thing you're buying does exist. It just like never actually changes hands.
Okay.
It's very weird. Companies dealing in commodities will often buy futures contracts to hedge their bets when negotiating deals in the commodity that they sell. They'll buy futures contracts as a sort of insurance from a deal not going through or the price of it dropping before they actually deliver it so that they would lose money on the deal. And this idea simply is if I was going to sell 10 potatoes, but I was worried about the price of potatoes dropping from what I paid for them when I bought them before I could resell them to you, I could go out and buy futures that would make money if the price of potatoes falls.
Okay.
So I, as a business, would make money on the deal if the price of potatoes rises, but on the futures contracts I buy, I'd make money if they fall. I get a profit from my potato deal, but lose a little bit of it on the futures if the price goes up as well.
Okay.
So it's basically like you might cut into some of the profits you could have made, but you also insulate yourself from risk.
Okay.
So that's what they would do. Allied and Tino De Angelis got into this practice with the oil that they were keeping in their tank farm. But De Angelis was ambitious as ever and began to start increasing his position from hedging to speculation, trying to make more money off of the futures market, and exposed his company to high risk because of it, and began needing more capital to funnel into the investments. However, because of his history of shady contracts, tax evasion, and bankruptcy, He was not able to get personal or business loans very easily. Banks did not want to deal with him.
Well, can you blame him though?
No,
he was terrible.
That's the correct choice.
Yeah, no, I don't think I would absolutely not loan him any money.
No, especially when he's asking for millions of dollars.
No.
So he instead turns to a method that would fuel the salad oil swindle: field warehousing. So, all right. Sorry, another explanation. All right. This is full of some technical stuff, but we'll get through it very soon. Field warehousing is an alternative way for businesses to get money. The warehouse holds the company's goods under the watch of this third-party warehouse, and that warehousing company verifies that the goods exist and are under watch by providing a warehousing receipt. Then the business that makes the goods can go to the bank and get a loan using the inventory as collateral. So basically this warehouse just says, yeah, they have, 1,000 beets in a warehouse, and we'll make sure they stay there. And then here's a piece of paper that says you have 1,000 beets. You take that to the bank and say, look, I have 1,000 beets. Give me a loan equal to their worth. And if I don't pay it back, you can have the beets.
Okay.
And this warehousing company will make sure that I don't steal the beets.
Okay.
So that's that. So this makes sense on paper, but in reality, the field warehouse is usually just set up as like a division of the owning company's property. Like they don't actually physically move their stuff anywhere. It's just still right where it was. And the guards, known as custodians, set to maintain the inventory and ensure the goods are still there, were oftentimes just like hired directly from the company, like people that the company knew. So there's like a bunch of conflict of interest. So this worked fine for Allied though, and they decided to get some cash this way and used a very reputable business in American Express to be their field warehouser. Now, American Express was a company that many other lenders would respect. They had a very respectable position in the traveler's check market at this time. They were the only ones that could really be trusted with that in the pre-computer era. So if your warehousing receipt had the American Express stamp on it, people were probably going to think a little bit more highly of it.
Yeah.
However, the American Express field warehousing branch was the only part of their business that was consistently losing money. So they were desperate for a winning account as well. And they saw potential in Allied to be that account because of how much business they were doing. Because of this, they were quick to make oversights, like how all of the tanks at the Bayonne plant were not registered with any regulatory body and therefore were not inspected regularly by any government body. And American Express approved the warehousing to be set up at this plant and had a team that would watch the oil they guaranteed at all times, staffed, as we discussed, largely from previous Allied employees, like people that Tino knew personally. And at the end of 1957, Allied was American Express's largest warehousing account with $2 million worth of receipts issued to them. And this is where the trouble started brewing. The money from the oil that Allied did have was not enough for Tino. So he began employing multiple methods to overstate their inventory to get more warehousing receipts from American Express, to get more loans, to speculate more in the futures market. When American Express would inspect and measure the oil in the tanks, they would often send the men that used to work at Allied physically up to the top of the tank, where they would drop a rope with like a plate on the end, and when it hit the top of the oil, they would measure the distance of rope and be able to calculate how much oil is in the tank.
Okay.
So the American Express guys were just like down on the ground holding a clipboard though, and they'd record the numbers. So in the morning, a manager would tell the Allied guys how much oil they wanted to have, and then they would just make up the numbers. And the American Express people just didn't catch on.
That seems so silly, but yeah, if they weren't climbing up to the top of the tank and actually measuring it, and they were just like taking their word for it, that's silly.
Yeah, well, I think it's also just they didn't think that
they wouldn't think they'd lie about it.
Yeah, they're like, it's fucking salad oil. Like,
yeah,
come on. If someone did measure it themselves, they might still get duped, though. Oftentimes, during inspection, a hatch would be opened at the top of the tank, and a collection device, like a ladle on a rope, would be dropped in to the tank and then pulled up to get a collection, a sample from the tank. And then that would be passed to a chemist to prove its purity and identify the type of oil it was, to make sure it's like, well, you said it's cottonseed oil, but it's not like cheaper. I don't know what's cheaper than that. Canola?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. Like if you said it's olive oil and then it
Corn.
turned out to be, corn oil, they'd be like, hey, fuck you, buddy. But Tino had these special inserts, like a big metal cylinder built into the tank just under where that hatch was, so that when you dropped the can in there, it would go into the cylinder and not into the actual tank. And then you could just like put whatever you wanted into the cylinder, and they think that was in the entire tank. So you fill the cylinder with soybean oil, but the rest, I don't know. Who cares? Fish oil, cottonseed oil. It doesn't matter.
Peanut oil.
Peanut oil.
Not avocado. That's expensive.
Oh, geez, no. I don't think they were. I don't
even think they were oiling avocados back then.
No,
they weren't milking the avocado.
Not yet. That's some rich people now shit.
Yeah.
The tanks were also all combined with pumps and pipes, so that as an inspector would tour the facility, they could just pump oil from one tank to the next, to like a different tank that they were going to go to later, so that by the end they would just count the same oil multiple times. Same thing like Crazy Eddie did with his electronic stock, or he'd just move it around and then they just count it they count the same thing multiple times. Well, it works here too. And the most notorious method that Allied used to inflate their oil stocks relied on good old elementary school science, that oil floats on water. They would fill the tanks almost completely with salt water and then add just about 2 feet of oil on top.
What?
So that if you looked into the tank, you would think it's full, but if you drain it from the bottom, you're feeling like you're riding the waves.
Oh
You're out
my
there catching some
God.
surf. And that's how the cylinder worked too, is that you could you could like do this trick, and then in the cylinder you could have it all oil, so that no matter how far you went down, you'd still pull up oil, and you wouldn't be able to tell that it was like just mostly water.
Oh my gosh.
American Express had been told that they were doing this by an anonymous whistleblower at one point, and then confirmed that there were high levels of water mixed with the oil in multiple tanks that they found during a surprise inspection afterwards. And De Angelis just spoon-fed them this explanation that some broken steam pipes, some water got into the oil.
This guy.
And they just wrote off the informant.
What?
Yeah, they just ignored it. They were like, all right. That sounds like that makes sense. We'll head on out. And I think it's largely because everyone was still making money at this point.
Yeah.
Allied could get all the capital it wanted, and American Express and the export companies were getting money from Allied because the companies that were giving them the loans on the warehouse receipts got interest payments, and Allied was paying the interest payments, so they were fine with it. And American Express was like literally going to go out of business, like this subsidiary, if they did not have this account. So they just kind of had to be like, whatever you say, Mr. De Angelis. Plus, all of the companies that did have the warehouse receipts, if for some reason the Allied like filed for bankruptcy, they still thought they could just get their oil.
No.
But it was water, so it doesn't exist.
Right.
Everyone was so blind that they didn't even read the Census Bureau's annual releases of oil exports. What a riveting read, right?
Right.
You reading those in your weekend?
You know I am.
Yeah, of course.
That's my nightly reading every night.
You slip it right in between the funny papers and Mad Magazine.
Oh, yeah.
You're reading the
Absolutely.
Census Bureau's oil export numbers.
Every night.
Of course. So no one caught that at its peak, Allied had warehouse receipts for more salad oil than was counted in literally the entire country in 1963. On paper, they owned more oil than the Census
whole
Bureau.
country?
Yeah, because Allied was giving the Census Bureau real numbers because they didn't want them to be like, you have the same amount of oil as the rest of the country.
Yeah.
But no one else paid attention to it. People were not doing their jobs.
No, people were just straight up not doing their jobs.
And receipts claimed that Allied had about 937 million pounds of oil. But in reality, they had less than 100 million.
That's a lot less.
Yes. But as long as nothing went wrong and money kept rolling in, then this could probably go on for quite a while. Still, that's only if nothing went wrong.
I feel like when you sell this at a certain point, people are going to figure out that they're getting water and not oil.
No, well, he was giving them oil. That's the thing. He was not giving the water to people. In his actual deals where they sold oil, they gave them the oil. This was only to get the warehouse receipts to get more money in the form of loans.
Got you.
And the whole time, like, he just really thought that, like,
no one's going to catch on. There's
a whole level to this where there was a lot of speculation about big oil deals being done by, like Russia and other companies that if they had bad crops, like bad crop seasons, they would need to buy oil from somewhere else. So Tino just kind of kept betting that he was going to get this like huge contract that would make up for all this, because he was kind of buying the futures because he was expecting like these big deals to come in, which would increase the price and he would be able to sell all these futures for a bunch of money as well. Okay. So he was just kind of betting that he was going to make his money back on all of his speculations. And going back a couple years to 1961, real quick, Tino had just secured a huge deal from Spain. This was like what we're just talking about, his mother-lode deal. They wanted 275 million pounds of soybean oil, which, remember, I just said they only had 100 million. So this is more than they even had.
Yeah.
And it was going to be worth $36.5 million. The only issue is that, like I said, they didn't have that oil. So in preparation, Tino went out and bought even more soybean oil futures because he was going to be one of the only people that would actually want the product.
Right.
So he was buying them so that when the deal went through, he could actually have the oil to give to them. After he bought all of the futures, though, Spain shocked him by suddenly just pulling out of the deal. Like, they already had a deal set up. I think they even had signed a contract, but they just pulled out with no explanation.
Oh, shit.
And it's kind of hard to enforce contracts between countries.
Yeah.
And they would not really say why. And then they added insult to injury by turning around and like later that year buying about the same amount of oil from Germany.
Do you think that they got tipped off?
So, okay, here's the thing, is that Tino thought, because he was I don't know if he was paranoid or this is just the story that he used, but he thought that there was like a secret society called, which this might be a real society. I didn't really look into it, called Opus Dei.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, that was like conspired to hurt, because his business was so big, to hurt him by doing this. But I mean, he said that about a lot of things. He was very like it's a witch hunt kind of guy, you know? Mm-hmm. If something went wrong for him, it was because everyone was out to get him.
I thought Opus Dei wasn't... I don't think they like specifically target this guy.
I don't know. That's what he said, though, is that it was politically motivated.
I mean, it might have been.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, they bought $200 million, or they bought all of this. It was like sunflower oil from Germany. And this left Allied with future contracts for 200 million pounds worth of soybean oil. And if the contracts came due, they would owe around $18 million for it. Oh, and shoot. Now they had no one to buy all of it.
Yeah, so they just have millions of pounds of soybean oil.
Yeah, on paper. And it's like 200% the actual what they have on hand. And they don't have anyone to buy it.
Oh.
And worse, if they flooded the market by selling all of the contracts, even at a loss, at like a high volume, it would likely depress the price of the oil, hurting them even further because it's what they sell.
Yeah.
And worsening their overextended position on all of their early speculation. Because there was also a whole ring of he was taking the money and funneling it to other people to invest in other futures accounts that were outside soybean oil as well. Like, he was taking a lot of gambles, and they were losing more often than not. So Tino just continued to hold on to these contracts, swapping them before they'd come due, usually a loss to avoid the shipping and holding prices of actually getting the oil, and just betting on another big deal to come along, like the one that he lost with Spain. And it would finally make it all worth it. He was caught at one point trading the futures illegally between companies that he owned. You can't do that.
No.
That's illegal. So he was suspended from trading in the market for 30 days by
Oh,
the
wow.
Commodities Enforcement Agency.
I feel like you would lose a lot of money.
I mean, probably. I mean, because he was basically manipulating the market by buying and selling these, so he couldn't do that for 30 days. But some damage had already been done as the overtrading had inflated the futures price of oil. Deals done in cash for oil were actually cheaper than they were in the futures market, to a decent margin, which is kind of symbolic that there's a bubble brewing. Like if you can buy something cheaper in real life than you can in a trading market, that's not a very good sign.
No.
Then American Express decided to not issue any more receipts to Allied, not because they thought they were being shady, but because they were actually looking for a buyer to take their money-losing subsidiary off their hands. They wanted to sell their warehousing business. And this left Tino hurting for liquidity. He could no longer get these warehouse receipts and get money immediately. Because he, I guess, was like really hurting for it, where he was struggling to meet deadlines to pay for like contracts based on the time it would take for him to get the warehouse receipts to a bank to get cash taken out.
Oh, wow.
Like he was cutting it close. But he finally did find liquidity, and it came in the form of a blank receipt book that was actually stolen from the American Express office.
Beautiful.
And he began forging them instead of just faking the oil and getting them from American Express
I'll
directly.
do one step better.
He's like, hey, I'll cut out the middleman. I'll just write it myself. Which is why I write my own opioid prescription. And this at a time that their futures position was at the most precarious. If there was a 1 cent per pound drop in the price of oil at this time, Allied would be on the hook for a margin call of $13.5 million.
Oh my God.
And just to remind everyone what a margin call is, if you hold an asset and if you hold an investment and you have an asset based on it as collateral, and the price of the investment falls, they call you up to pay them the difference.
Oh, wow.
Because your collateral no longer covers it.
Yeah.
So yeah, 1 cent per pound.
And they would owe $13
And they would
million.
owe $13.5 million. So he really could not afford it.
No, he couldn't.
the
That's
price to change.
insane, actually.
Which means that he had to keep buying.
Yeah.
Because he had to keep inflating the price. It was crazy. So, of course, it was the worst time for it to happen when in November of 1963, it was going around that a big deal with Russia for sunflower oil was about to fall through. They had been talking, the government had been speculating about this deal with Russia for a long time, so prices kept increasing as people were waiting for it. And then the Congress came out and was like, nah, we're not going to do it. So many commodities traders actually switched their recommendations to sell all on the same day. And also on that day, a Commodities Enforcement Agency investigator showed up to investigate the futures trading of Allied because they finally were like, you guys own such a large percentage of this that it's dangerous. So we want to see your books. Tino kind of knew that it was all over and hurriedly filed for bankruptcy the next day. And when the bankruptcy liquidator showed up to the Bayonne plant, the non-existence of the phantom oil was finally discovered, as almost all the tanks were filled with seawater, sludge, or even still just gasoline, which I guess was cheaper at the time.
Back then you bought gas for 10 cents a gallon.
Yeah, he was like, just fill it with something cheap, like gasoline.
Oh my God. Not today.
Oh, God, no. God, no. Maybe avocado oil is still more expensive.
I was going to say maybe.
Olive oil.
I was going to say I just did buy olive oil, and it was definitely not a gallon, and it was almost $9. So
the debt that was incurred almost immediately from this discovery of phantom oil caused the suspension of 2 different firms from the trading floor that had doled out loans to Allied in return for now worthless warehouse receipts. The Haupt Company, the biggest lender to Allied, owed $37 million that it now did not have the means to pay because it was $37 million on oil that didn't exist.
Oh, man.
Although they were later reinstated, both of them were forced into mergers or bankruptcy soon afterwards. So this scandal took down like two very large lenders on Wall Street at the time.
That's crazy.
This hit the trading floor hard as the Dow dropped 9 points in a day, which was the largest drop all year up until that point. And it was November, so it was pretty decently ended.
Yeah.
But it was about to drop even further because no shit, later that week on November 22nd, I believe, of 1963, the nation was rocked with the assassination of President JFK. The same week that sent the market into a tailspin, and actually they had to close the market 83 minutes early that day, which is a very drastic move. And it remained closed until like the following Tuesday.
Because of the assassination.
Yeah, because everyone was selling so fast that they were like, this is going to ruin the market, like if we don't stop it. So they just shut it down.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean,
Were they? Was it because they just thought like that the state of the country was like in such jeopardy? Is that why they were selling it so quick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when the president gets assassinated, usually you think that like especially.
I mean, shit's gonna hit the fan.
Especially because this is still like tensions with the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
are still
Cold War was.
high.
Yeah.
You know, the Cuban Missile Crisis had happened recently. So I think it was just, everyone freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, this isn't going to be good.
That's fair.
And after everything was settled, Allied was short oil worth a stated price of $175 million based on the receipts it had sent out, which is about $1.8 billion in today's money. So that's the amount of money that he basically stole.
Yeah.
$1.8 billion.
That's crazy.
It's one of the largest ones we've talked about, I think, which is very insane.
But it's about salad oil of all things.
I know, right? On December 23rd, 1963, Tino was indicted on 18 counts of fraud in connection with the creation and circulation of the fake warehouse receipts. Tino would continually accuse the government of forcing Allied's bankruptcy because they were afraid of how much market share they were taking in the oil industry, which by my measure was about 300% of it because he had inflated all of the oil in America by a lot. Additionally, Tino originally attempted to say that he did not have any. He's like, I don't have any cash left over from the scheme. Personally, I got like $5. However, it was proven that he and his associates had actually squirreled away $500,000 in numbered Swiss bank accounts. So
Damn.
They got it back, though, I'm pretty sure.
I was going to say, if they're numbered, that's not so sneaky.
That being said, there were like stories about how he, like the day that he left, like filed for bankruptcy and left the Bayonne tank plant, that he just like had a bunch of cash with him that he just took and like hid. They know that one of his associates did take like $50,000 in cash and just had it stored in his closet.
That's a good place for it.
Yeah, because they went to their bank accounts and cleaned them all out afterwards too. They filed for bankruptcy and immediately went to their bank accounts, withdrew all the cash, and then it was just gone.
Wow.
So, very shady.
That's super shady. I would not. Oh my God. I would be so scared to have that much cash in my house.
Well, you're also getting investigated by the feds, so I mean,
Yeah, fair.
you got a lot to worry about. Eventually, Tino was convinced to plead guilty as the maximum sentence was 180 years for all of those combined. It was 10 per if they served them concurrently. And he was saddled with a 20-year sentence in 1965, of which he only served 7. As a fallout of the swindle, American Express put its warehouse subsidiary into bankruptcy, which left those holding the warehouse receipts pretty much out to dry. American Express did eventually agree to pay back the holders of the receipts a total of $35 million, but this was far away from it was greater than $100 million that they were actually worth. And it was kind of also difficult to determine exactly which receipts held were dispensed from American Express, and it was kind of their fault, and which were the forgeries put out by Tino, which weren't technically their fault. So it just kind of muddied the situation a lot. In the end, though, I mean, the industry recovered, moved on. But this was the worst blow to the salad oil industry since the invention of, I don't know, any other dressing.
French had him beat Catalina.
I got to tell you, if you offer me, do you want to put oil on a salad or literally anything else? I don't think it's a hard decision.
Milk.
For me.
You would take milk over.
Dressing wise, come on, don't be ridiculous.
That's my thing.
Being ridiculous? Mm-hmm. Fair enough. After Tino's probation at the age of 56, he went back to work.
This guy was only 56?
He served 7 years, so he's 49 when he went in, 56 when he got out.
He was younger than I was thinking.
Oh, you thought he was like really old?
No, I don't know. I just didn't think he was. I mean, I feel like 56, you still got a lot of life ahead of you.
Well, he dropped out of high school.
That's true.
He started in the meatpacking industry. He was 17.
Mm-hmm.
He was manager when he was 20. He owned his first business in his 20s.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, late 40s. He went back to working in the meatpacking industry after he was paroled, which kind of accepted him with open arms. He went back to like high up positions in meatpacking companies.
I think I've talked about this before on here, but I did in high school work at a butcher shop, and that doesn't shock me that they would. It's not like the highest quality people working in those businesses, so it's not super shocking to me that they were like, yeah, come on back.
Yeah, fair enough. The only problem is that he kept scamming people. He did not stop that. He was arrested for avoiding payment to livestock shipment, or avoiding payment for livestock shipments on multiple occasions, like in multiple millions of dollars, not like just like dink and dunk, like little kind of deliveries, like $3.5 million deliveries of livestock that he just did not pay for. And eventually was sentenced to another 7 years in 1980, but was paroled in 1983. So he's been sentenced to 30, served 10 at this point between two different jail
Hey, those are actually pretty good odds.
I guess. I think the second time you got to be like, you're serving the whole thing.
Right?
You don't get paroled now.
No.
After his release, he was the general manager of another meatpacking company, Enfield's Natural Lean Pork Company, and was forging letters of credit to buy the pork. And at the age of 77, he pled guilty to transportation of fraudulent securities and was sent to prison again, but was also quickly paroled again.
Well, at this point, he's an old man.
He's still doing crime, though.
I know. Clearly, he's sharp enough to do it.
Or dumb enough.
Well,
he saw how it went the past couple times, and he's still like, hey, you know what?
You know what? Let me do it again.
You know what? And after all this, the portly, bicycle-loving, candy shop-owning boy died an old man at the ripe age of 93 in 2009, and never provided a tell-all on his rise to being the salad oil king, to his downfall, which has left many secrets still left unanswered. Tino De Angelis was the epitome of someone with too much ambition, who never learns their lesson. We see perseverance in the face of strife as an admirable quality. Often in life. And Tino had that. It's just that the adversity he faced was that he kept getting caught trying to rip people off. This lummox of a man perpetrated a scandal that personally enriched him with more than $1 billion in today's money, but yet I still had never heard of the Salad Oil King before starting this episode.
I had never heard of it either.
Even if you do hear about him, the only story that gets spread is how Warren Buffett made one of his first big wins by buying 5% of American Express after its stock dropped because of this scandal.
Whoa. That's interesting.
So we hype the winners, but fail to learn from the losers. So thanks for learning with these losers on this week's episode. And thus ends the story of Tino De Angelis, which I think means tiny man of the angels in Italian.
De Angelis?
Yeah. Of angels?
Yeah. I know.
I think Tino means tiny.
I know a De Angelis.
So yeah. Thank you guys for listening. We hope you liked it. If you want to pick up the book, that was The Great Salad Oil Swindle. It's free online from Internet Archive. Go ahead and knock yourself out if you really want to get into the weeds on this one. Wouldn't recommend it, though. And if you liked what you heard, you want to hear some more, you can support us for free by writing a review. You can write a review with words on Apple Podcasts if you're so inclined. Our analytics show most of you are there right now, so you might as well pop in, leave a review. If you don't want to write something out, hey, I get it. I hate writing too. Just use stars.
Yes.
Use stars. Like, this is an Uber ride, but we're not going to like force you at the end to be like, oh, you're only putting 4 stars. You have to give feedback, which always makes me go like, I'll just give 5 stars. He could have, the driver could have been driving ridiculously crazy, and I'll just be like,
5 stars.
I don't want to write why though. So 5 stars.
The only time I don't give them 5 stars is if they're creepy.
I don't get a lot of creepy ones. I try though. I try, but I'm just not like, I'm not creepable. It sucks.
Probably because you're a man.
Fine. So if you want to support us even further, you can like our socials. Go follow our socials. DM us on our socials. Do the social thing on the socials, right? You know, it's...
Be social.
It's 2024. You know what social media is. It's facebook.com at White Collars Red Hands. It is Instagram at White Collars _ Red Hands. It's Twitter or X at White Collars Pod. It's TikTok at White Collars Red Hands. You can visit our website. That's whitecollarsredhands.com. There's a contact us page through there if you want to submit an episode. We do a fan submitted episode every season. You could be the next. Go ahead, throw it on there, and check out our merch while you're there. That's what the button says. Click it. Takes you to a merch store. You know what merch is too. Once again, 2024. If you don't want to go through the website, for some reason, you already have Gmail open. You can't open one more tab. All right, lazy. It's whitecollarsredhands@gmail.com. So go ahead, do that. The biggest help you can do, tell a friend.
Hell yeah.
Tell a friend. Everyone's listening to podcasts. It's the cool thing now. Who fucking reads books anymore?
Not me.
We consume all of our media through 2 people who aren't qualified to talk about something talking about something.
Yeah, honestly.
All right? That's how we want it nowadays. So everyone's looking for one. Why not recommend this one, huh? Help a guy out. Help a guy and a gal out, please.
Please.
You know what? I think that's it.
it.
That's it? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this decently long episode, and we'll see you next week on another one of White Collars Red Hands.